This is Rachel Leishman, and I'm an obsessive Star Wars fan.
You're listening to Around the Galaxy.
Welcome to episode number 197 of Around the Galaxy, the Star Wars fan talk show. I'm your host, Pete Fletzer, and along with my co-host, Nick Milkey, we bring you the conversations with the people behind the Star Wars fandom. Since 2019, we've had the privilege of speaking to Oscar winners, Emmy winners, New York Times bestsellers, celebrity superfans, and social media voices capturing that magic moment when Star Wars fans meet. This week, we are excited to welcome Rachel Leishman to the podcast. She is the assistant editor at the Mary Sue. She has a lifelong dedication of writing and a professional journey that dates all the way back to 2016. She has a love for movies, television, and classic rock, and it shines through in every aspect of her work. She is known as the resident Spider-Man expert, and yes, I said Spider-Man, like it's his last name. And she also has an infectious joy for all things Star Wars. She's never shy about her passion for the nerdy and the fantastical. She's based in New York and brings a fresh perspective and boundless enthusiasm to the entertainment landscape. And yes, she also hosts both a Pedro Pascal and a Harrison Ford podcast, which adds layers of insight and excitement to her already multifaceted contributions to the pop culture world. But before we get started, I wanted to remind you of some of the changes to the shows and the schedules here at ATG in 2024. We're really excited to share that if you are listening to this on Thursday, tonight we are going live once again with our brand new show on our YouTube channel called ATG Live. Every Thursday at 8 p.m. East, Nick and I will talk about all the Star Wars news of the week. Plus, each episode features a special guest, and tonight our guest is comic book story editor and consultant Heather Antos. We are so excited to have her. She's done work on Marvel Star Wars comics. She's also done some Star Trek and just about every other piece of fandom. We'll be taking your comments in the chat as well as playing back your voicemails. And speaking of which, we'd love to hear from you. Call our voicemail line at 504-321-1501 at any time. Leave us your Star Wars hot take, comments on this show, or comments on ATG Live, thoughts about anything happening in the world of Star Wars, or you just want to say hi, whatever, that's great. Put our hotline number in your phone and call us whenever the mood strikes. It's 504-321-1501. That's 504-321-1501. And if you missed the live show, well, don't worry about it. We're putting the replay right here in the podcast stream every Monday, so keep your ears open and ready for that. You can also follow us on social media at ATGcast and everywhere else at the SSW Network. Follow us today and be part of the conversation. And now, without further ado, I am very excited to bring you our conversation with Rachel Leishman after these messages. We are talking to Rachel Leishman today. Rachel, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm super. Tell people a little bit about yourself.
I am an entertainment journalist. I do a lot of our celebrity interviews for the site, and I'm just kind of the point person on geekdom at my job, because my boss always makes the joke that, like, if she doesn't know an actor, I probably do, and I can pinpoint like 4 movies that he's been in off the top of my head.
You're like a walking 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right?
Yeah.
Do we still use Kevin Bacon? I mean, I feel like he's kind of like...
I think he's still known as, like, when you're doing the 6 degrees, like, I feel like that is what kids know Kevin Bacon for. It's like the 6 degrees of...
I didn't see Footloose, but they can name... we're getting like close to like 6 degrees of Pedro Pascal pretty soon, I think. Or yeah. So... we are. It seems like every time I turn around, it's either him or Oscar Isaac. So, like, the Star Wars guys.
Yeah, there's my Oscar Isaac and then technically Pedro Pascal section behind me. I was trying to move because I also have Inside Llewyn Davis. It's like 2 Oscar Isaac posters, but they like frame my head if I'm seated the right way there, if I do that.
Perfect. So let's talk a little bit about that. So, we'll get to your Star Wars story in a little bit, but you have a Pedro Pascal podcast. Is that still running? Is it still going? And
yeah, Pedro Pascal still going on. It's me and my co-host Katrina Dennis and our producer Ashley, who we just call her producer Ashley the entire time.
Yeah.
But we're all Pedro fans, and it started, it's like in the pandemic. I was just like, I got real into watching Pedro things, and I was like, does anybody like want to just do a podcast and talk about him? And then it just spawned into Pedro, which like he got told about it in Vanity Fair. Like all of my friends who've ever interviewed him have been like Pedro Pascal, and he's like, dude, everyone keeps just saying the name of this movie. So we have that still, which is very fun because we just kind of are chaos the entire time.
So it's funny how many podcasts were started during a pandemic, and just like, not all of them have survived, but the good ones have. So that's great. So let's start. Let's get back a little bit to your Star Wars story. Tell us a little bit about when you first saw Star Wars, because obviously entertainment and geekdom is your thing. You call yourself a fangirl on your Twitter bio, or your X bio, whatever, and it will always be Twitter to me. But it seems fairly rooted in Star Wars. So tell us a little bit about your Star Wars experience, your Star Wars history.
So I had seen it before this because I have two older brothers. One is 20 years older than me, and then the other one is 10 years older than me. The one who's 10 years older than me, him and I, we actually have a podcast together because we're just very much the same kind of person where it comes to movies and television. We just love to talk about characters and deep dive into things. And when I was really little, I had obviously seen like, now how I'm watching my niece do this, I understand how I had seen them all because they're always just on TV and she's around like half paying attention. And so I remember very clearly though, I was, I guess I was either 5 or 6 depending on when in the year it fell. But my parents couldn't find a babysitter and they took me to see Air Force One.
Okay.
And I came out of that movie and was obsessed with Harrison Ford. Like I just kept talking about Harrison Ford. And my brother, like, I just kept calling him the president, though, because I didn't know. Like, I didn't read the thing and be like, oh, Harrison Ford played President James Marshall. I just kept talking about the president. And my brother was like, why is she obsessed with Bill Clinton? My mom was like, she's not. We saw Air Force One, so she's obsessed with Harrison Ford. And he goes, why isn't she talking about Han Solo then? Why is she talking about him? And she was like, I don't think she remembers seeing Star Wars. And so then he showed me Star Wars again. After I learned who Harrison Ford was. And then when the re-releases happened, my oldest brother took us. So it's like kind of rooted in like me and my brothers all love Star Wars. And so we did that. And then the prequels were obviously like my thing because I was 99. So I was like 7 turning 8 by the time Phantom Menace came out. And so I'm very much a prequel kid. And it just like continued to be rooted in like my friendships and the people I hang out with. And it has just grown into like most every friend I've made has been because of something Star Wars adjacent.
Yeah.
And,
So let me, I hesitate to go down this road so early in the conversation, but I'm going to ask, there has been a lot of talk in social media about quote unquote, girls are not Star Wars fans, right? And you said you grew up in the prequel era, which is fantastic. My 11-year-old, my daughter she's 14 now, but when Force Awakens came out, she saw Rey and she was like immediately, I love the stories and I have photos of her. Like she made her own Rey costume before she even saw the movie. So Rey means a lot to her. But you said a lot of your friendships were rooted in Star Wars as a prequel kid. Tell me a little bit about that. And was it like, was it mostly female friends or was it guy friends? Tell me a little bit. I'm curious about that.
Me and my best friend Jessica, we were like, I think like 13 or 14 when Revenge of the Sith came out. And I can still quote that movie like the back of my hand. I watched it 58 times the year it came out because I like was obsessed with Revenge of the Sith. And because we were like old enough teenagers that our parents were like, you know what's right and wrong. You can like go hang out somewhere and we don't have to keep our eyes on you.
Right.
They just drop us off at the movie theaters. and we would just watch Revenge of the Sith over and over again in the theater. So I think in the theaters alone, I saw that movie like 11 times. Because it would be like, what are you guys doing today? And it'd be like, well, Rachel and Jessica want to go watch Revenge of the Sith again. Let's just drop them off at the movie theater, and then like I can do whatever you need me to. And so her and I are very rooted in like what our friendship has always been rooted in what people deem as like boy things, because like The Goonies is our favorite movie together.
Yeah.
Outside of like Star Wars, and her and I are the two who talk about Star Wars the most. And like, I've never understood or liked the idea of like the boy thing, because I was like, every nerdy thing I love, you would classify that as a boy thing. Like my love of Spider-Man I never saw it as a boy thing, but people would be like, comics, that's boys. And I'm like, some boy try and tell me what I don't know about Spider-Man. Like, it's kind of like that, where I never had the idea that it was like girls didn't like this until I got older, and then was dealing with people who were like, oh, well, you must not know anything about Star Wars. And I'm like, sure, you can tell me all that information.
So, well, like, tell me about when you discovered that, like, wait a second, there are people, like, I always find it interesting because, like, as an OT kid, I know, shocking, hard to believe, I saw Star Wars when I was 7 years old in the theaters, and it was just called Star Wars. So
before they
added episode 4. Yeah. But I remember like when Jar Jar Binks came out and the prequels, and honestly, like, I do remember a lot of the OT fans, myself included, were kind of like, I don't know about that. And it did take, I feel good that I've evolved, but I always need to be transparent and honest. Like, I didn't love Phantom Menace when it came out, and I went to the New York City premiere, like the celebrity premiere, and I like was there for the thing. And I was like, I don't know what I saw, but I find it always very interesting because a lot of prequel kids, as I still call them, they were like, I didn't even know that people didn't like Jar Jar Binks till I went to college or something like that. So tell me how you kind of discovered like that. Wait a second, I didn't even know that people thought Star Wars was just for boys. And how did you respond to that? And when did you first kind of see that as the reality you were dealing with?
I mean, I had like little moments where it would be like, my least favorite thing in the world is when a dude quizzes me when I'm at someplace. Like it happened with me. I went to the Doctor Who premiere when Peter Capaldi was first debuting his episode here in New York. And I had like come from work. So I was wearing like my work outfit, and some dude looked at me and was like, do you even like Doctor Who? And I was like, I have a Doctor Who tattoo. So yes, I do.
Right.
And then he was interested in talking to me. And it was like a lot of times with Star Wars, guys would always be like, oh, you're a Star Wars fan? Can you even list the machete order? And I'm like, that's such a weird question, first of all, to be like, what's the machete order? I'm like, it's this. And they're like, oh, so you do like Star Wars? I'm like, no, you ruined whatever like social grace you think you had by asking me to prove like my fandom of this thing. And it didn't really start happening until not even high school, because high school, I think we all were nerds at the school I went to. So everyone kind of had something they were really nerdy about. But in college got worse, where people would like quiz me on things. And I was like, stop quizzing me. It's not a game show. You're not giving me money for the information that I know.
Right. To me, it's always so strange that like that's a barrier to entry. Like even like online quizzes. Because first of all, look, I've been a Star Wars fan since I was, for 45 years. I have a Star Wars podcast. I'm the guy that you described, and I was slightly offended. I'm not really, but when you did an article and you said something about I think it was like middle-aged men with helmets, Mandalorian helmets on their wall, and I was like,
to be fair, I was commenting on one dude. One specific, actually 3 specific dude bros.
Okay, no, but I wasn't truly offended, but I get what you're saying, because I mean it's weird. I was like, specifically 3 dude bros I was thinking of with that one. You were not one of the 3. Okay, well that's good, but it just seems so strange to me, like quizzing somebody as a barrier to entry, because if I was to enter a Star Wars trivia contest, I would probably lose, and not even like in the extreme, like not in the hard level, like in the medium level. Cause I've forgotten more than I'll ever know. So to me, that just seems like such a strange thing, but I guess it's, some sort of a I don't know, some sort of a dominance of some sort to show that I know something that you don't. It feels weird.
Yeah, and it's also weird that it's always the machete order. Like, I'm like, you couldn't think of asking me a question about, like, the EU or something that is, like, less mainstream. Like, pretty sure most people at least know what the machete order is. So if they don't know the exact order, because it keeps shifting now, they can at least be like, oh, it's where you watch Star Wars and you keep the idea of Palpatine hidden from whoever you're watching it with.
Yeah. I do have to say, though, you might appreciate this. My daughter, again, who is like this next generation, she's not a big fan anymore. Yeah, she's into Taylor Swift and she's 14 and dad's not as cool as he used to be. But when we were preparing for episode 9, she hadn't really watched the prequels. And what I loved about that was when Palpatine finally does, reveal himself to Anakin, she turned to me and she goes, I knew there was something not right about that guy. And I was like, I never would have thought like that she didn't know. So it was pretty cool. And then of course when we left Rise of Skywalker, we were on our way out of the theater and she literally said in a stage whisper, so how is Rey his granddaughter? And I was like, holy cow, she just ruined it for all these people on the line. But
and they're like, what?
She's got to be kidding. That can't be real. That's not what happened. So how did you, as a prequel kid, and how did you respond to the Disney era? How has it struck you as a fan? The first two of the sequel trilogy I love very much. Rise of Skywalker, I have my own issues with it, and I literally had just finished recording a podcast with my brother about Rogue One where I also complained about this. The Rise of Skywalker to me is very much JJ getting to play with his toys because it's like, why was Palpatine back? Like, why did he come back? Right. There's no reason other than you wanted to play with Palpatine. Yep.
Like, and so like little things like that have just made it like tainted for me. However, I love that we got Ben Solo in that movie. That was the first time I ever really loved Kylo because I was like, he's Han Solo's kid. Like, you can see it. Now he is like shrugging like him and like doing things like Han. And that, like, so there are things about that movie that make me very warm to it in a way that I'm like, if they didn't have this, I really wouldn't like this movie. But The Force Awakens I loved, despite my mortal enemy C-3PO ruining the only reunion I got of Han and Leia.
Right.
And I love The Last Jedi a lot because I am team Luke Skywalker is the biggest drama queen of all time. 100% that's what he would do. So like, I love those two movies.
Yeah.
And then Rogue One is probably one of my favorite Star Wars movies of all time. And I really love Solo because much like how I feel about Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi, Han Solo is like, I always say this, but like has been seen as like a ladies' man by people in the public. I'm like, nah. He's a hermit who doesn't like people.
Right.
And my biggest worry with Solo was like, they're going to make him like really suave. And they didn't. Like,
right.
So
they left it to Lando, as they should, because that's Lando's job. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so that stuff I love. And I really do like the TV. Like, I think all the TV shows, I haven't really had like a problem with Star Wars television. Obi-Wan, as much Andor is looking at it, I'm like, yes, Andor is a perfect show. I love Andor very much. But Obi-Wan speaks to me as that prequel kid and like a kid who wanted more of Princess Leia. Like, the minute that show showed me that it was Leia, I was like, I'm fully on board. I love it so much. I have no cares in this world other than getting to see Princess Leia as a kid getting to like go on an adventure that we always only saw Luke do.
Yeah. And I think they did such an amazing job of, I can't remember the actress's name.
Vivian Lyra Blair.
Yes, she captured the Carrie Fisher sass. A lot of people have said it, but I just feel like Carrie would have loved her.
Oh, yeah.
Talk a little bit about like this concept of feeling like there's ownership of a story, because I think that kind of goes with whether it's Star Wars or Spider-Man or Batman or Lord of the Rings. What is it about fandom you think that, and you know, being a fan of multiple fandoms, you've probably seen this, how do you avoid getting into the difficult fandom conversations, or how do you address them where there suddenly becomes this sort of ownership that really feels kind of, certainly unhealthy for one, but it leads to the quizzing you on machete order kind of stuff.
For me, I do think it's rooted in a lot of these, like, I don't want to generalize them as dude bros, but for the most part, it is like dude bros who get really angry about it. And I think it is rooted in their own, like, inability to see that it's not just, they were not the only ones to like it, because I do think that they were made fun of as kids for liking these things, but I think it's because they were also not nice people. Like, that's kind of my thought process constantly, is like, you weren't made fun of for liking Star Wars. Right. They used that because you were being a jerk. Right. Like, they just threw that in your face because you were acting a certain way. And so it then has led to them being like, well, since I got made fun of for that, and not recognizing that they weren't made fun of for just that they are the only ones who have experienced that. And they flock to the same kind of, like, people who also only, they think the same way. So then when women or, like, people who they were like, well, yeah, I never saw you in high school talking about Star Wars, suddenly are like, no, yeah, I love Star Wars. I love this, this, and this. They see it as like a competition instead of just seeing like, oh, cool, I wasn't alone. There's a whole world of people who love Star Wars. Like, this is cool to talk about. And so I think that's kind of where it's rooted, is like, they're just unwilling to see that the galaxy far, far away is a lot bigger than just their view of it.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I assume you've been to Star Wars Celebration, and you don't see any of that behavior there. You literally, because it's people who have gone in and are starting in that right spot of, oh, you like Star Wars? Cool. Let's talk. And it doesn't start with immediately trying to prove why you're not there. I think one of my favorite recent comments on one of our shows, we had Andy Hodges, One Hat Town on Twitter, on our show, and he was talking about Star Wars from his perspective, from the queer community, and he said people who say that they've never met a queer Star Wars fan, they just didn't come out to you because they didn't feel safe with you. And that's a similar situation to what you're saying. Like, yeah, you didn't meet the girl Star Wars fans in high school because they didn't want to talk to you. And they're carrying that with them as they move forward. So, yeah, exactly. And like you said about Star Wars Celebration, like, I am a very big shirt person. Like, I didn't even do this on purpose. I realized I'm wearing my Rian Johnson Whodunit shirt. And it was just like, I love shirts that have like sayings about movies or like are a movie poster, whatever it is. And going to my second Star Wars Celebration, I felt very comfortable wearing my Last Crusade shirt, which I don't really like wearing it in public that much, because like I've had people quiz me about that. Like, I was interning and I was standing in my Last Crusade shirt, and some guy was like, do you know what movie that is? And I was like, the movie on my shirt? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, yes, it's Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And then he started to try and quiz me about Harrison Ford. And finally, like, the guy who I was working with came over and was like, sir, I'm so sorry. If you're going to quiz anyone on Harrison Ford, it sure as shit wouldn't be her. Right, yeah. Not her. And so, like, but in that space at Star Wars Celebration, I wore that shirt. I wore a shirt that had a bunch of pictures of Jon Favreau all over it because I love him. And like, it was a bunch of people being like, oh my God, did you see Jon Favreau in that shirt? Oh my God, like, you should go over there. There's an Indiana Jones, like, standee thing. Like, it was people who got it and didn't question it. They were just like, here's this information that you might need. Go. Right. I was like, thanks. So from your experience, is it the majority of the fandom that is more like Star Wars Celebration, or is it more like what we see and you probably have a very different experience than I do because you're a woman who's a fan of geeky stuff. Do you feel like it's even split, or how is it? How often are you dealing with the crap, I guess is the way I'm asking the question.
I think you can find, I mean, if you look for both sides of that, you can find either one. Like, I have crafted a group of Star Wars fans, both in my personal life and online, that are not the bad dudes who only want to, like, say that they're the only ones who like it. So like on Twitter, I've made a lot of friends through my friend Maggie, who she introduced me to like my friend Arzu and my friend Norhall and my friend Candace and Britt and all these women who love Star Wars. And so like that crafted a Star Wars community online through them and their friends that like is just very loving and accepting and open. And like it's how I met Christina Ariel, and like her and I became friends. It's like all of this grew into like an actual like wonderful group of men and women online who are all big Star Wars fans, but are also like people who understand that it is not just one person's franchise.
Right.
And then like I used to go to the George Lucas talk show all the time when it was at UCB. And so like I met my best friend who was like my roommate. Her and I met there. I met my other friend who used to live with me there. And like we made that group of Star Wars fans from like a collective experience of going to this talk show, which was both loving Star Wars and making fun of George Lucas at the same time.
Yep.
And like you can craft that section out of the Star Wars fandom, but you're always going to find guys who think they know the most or think like you pointing out a faux pas is an offense to them personally.
Right.
And so you have to just kind of learn how to navigate around it and decide what is and isn't worth fighting them on.
Yeah. It's funny you say George Lucas talk show. Patrick Cotner is a good friend of the show here, and it's just such a wild thing. It's so cool.
In that doc, I think me and my friends are in the documentary.
Oh, are you?
Because we used to go every week, and they interviewed us, and we're like, I can't wait to see what I said, because it's been like years at this point.
It was so long ago. Along this, it's so funny. One of my when we had Ash Crossan on the show, she said, and I think you're speaking to this a little bit. She said Star Wars is like your little brother, and like you can make fun of him, but you love him, right? And it's Star Wars is full of that, and I think it's when people who want to see more of Order 66 versus more of the fantasy, it's kind of like that tells you what you need to know about that type of fan. I think, it's, I think it was somebody just posted a picture of Luthen Rael and the Pirate King from season 3 of Mando, and they're like, they can both exist in this universe. And I think it's important to recognize that all these different characters can exist, and all these different fans can exist, and that's what I think. That's what makes Star Wars such an interesting fandom. So let's switch gears just a little bit, because you've been a fan of so many different things, and you've gone into the journalism side of things. You've covered entertainment. I guess my first question for you is, how do you sort of draw the line? Because I find it hard sometimes when I'm interviewing people. I'm a pro and I stick with it, but there are times where I just want to fanboy out. But the weirdest one, people might think this is a strange one, Adam F. Goldberg. I interviewed him, who did the Disturbance in the Force documentary with Kyle Newman. And talking to him, I had to really hold back the geekiness because I love his show, and it's just. But anyway, where I'm going with this is, I do have a point. How do you, as a fan, sort of separate out the journalist, movie critic, expert in entertainment from the, oh my gosh, I'm talking to whoever, oh my gosh, I'm going to this premiere? How do you keep those separate?
I don't, because it's me. It's part of who I am. Like, I went to the John Wick premiere in a shirt that I had a picture of Keanu Reeves from like the 80s holding flowers, and it said John Wick. I incorporate a lot of that into everything I do just because it's who I am. Yeah. Like, I don't want to ever talk to someone. And like, the only time I didn't straight up be like, I've loved this thing my entire life, was like when I interviewed Tom Holland, because I was so nervous because I was talking to Tom Holland that I just gave hints that I loved his stuff by like telling him every time he cries, I cry. And he like started laughing, and he was like, well, I'm good at my job, and I'm so sorry you cry all the time. And I was like, it's constant. And like, we were making jokes, and like, I tend to also like, depending on the person, like you can tell a vibe. And if someone's like, don't mention this thing, like I don't. Right. Like, I think I talked to Carrie Elwes, and they were like, keep it on the movie. And he was like, she was a great interview. I'm like, yeah, because you wouldn't let me talk about The Princess Bride. There are like people that you can feel like, I think it was Taron Egerton. At the end, I was like, my biggest gripe with the world is that you don't have an Oscar for Rocket Man. It's going to be on my gravestone. And he was like, what? Because I wait until like the opportune moment to like really geek out. Like I don't do it straight out the gate.
Right.
Because like, you have to also build that relationship of like, you're talking to this person, you're talking about a specific work. But I still have my moments where I'm like, nah, I'm going to geek out. Like, I think the most recent example was like, I didn't mention Spider-Man, surprisingly, when I interviewed Willem Dafoe and Emma Stone back to back at the Poor Things premiere. However, Mark Ruffalo came down the line and there wasn't enough time for me. And so all I could do was take a picture, and I just was like, I love Zodiac so much. Like, it's one of the good ones. I was like, yeah, it is. I love it. It's my favorite movie. And so, like, I have, like, moments like that where it's like, you don't have enough time. Get it out of your system. And so I just kind of balance it like that. But my shirts are really kind of where I'm like, I'm going to be as nerdy as possible while still being a professional. Like, I wore a Face Off t-shirt to interview Nick Cage at Renfield. He was like, Face Off, and I was like, it's Face Off. So it's
He's like, you're the one who bought that shirt.
because John Travolta and has his face on it.
That's funny. That's funny. So what are some of your favorite moments in interviewing celebrities? I mean, obviously Tom Holland was a big one for you, but do you have any stories about like about interviewing some of your geeky heroes?
Yeah. So like Mary Elizabeth Winstead was a fun interview, and it's like one of my favorite from last year. Mainly because like we had a great conversation. It was like it's Ramona Flowers and Helena Bertinelli, like two characters I love, and then also Hera. Like it was just a bunch of nerdiness rolled into one. But then I also was so cold because it was very cold here that day that I was in my warm Obi-Wan Kenobi sweatshirt, and I like tried to hide. Like I literally tried to sit like this the entire time because it was her and Ellen Wong, and I was like, I don't want them to see this sweatshirt and be like, this girl's really weird. She's wearing an Obi-Wan Kenobi sweatshirt. And so at the very end, I was like, I'm so sorry I have to say this because if I leaned back in any way, shape, or form, we would have seen the sweatshirt. And she just started like cackling because it's like ugly pictures of Ewan McGregor too, and he's like bending down like this. But I like was like, I'm sorry, like I'm just so cold. This is what I had. And so I loved that. Like I loved my Taron interview because I had 10 minutes and it was just me talking about Blackbird a lot, but then getting to talk to him about Rocket Man, which is one of my favorite movies, and also talking to him about like the Little Shop that he was supposed to do and then didn't do. Mm-hmm. I have little moments now where every time I talk to someone who was part of Star Trek, like the Kelvinverse, I tell them I will willingly write Star Trek 4 for free and just like give it to them. And they all laugh and they're like, we all want to go back. We agree with you. And I'm like, great, take my free idea then. And so like little moments like that make me really happy. And like premieres are always different because it's like you're trying to be so quick that you don't get to be as fun, but like I'll always be grateful I got to go to the Indiana Jones premiere because I got to talk to Harrison Ford, which I was terrified of my entire life. And then he loved me and I was like, this is great, never mind.
It worked.
I take back all my fears. And it was so funny because like I was in that space and like Marshall from Disney was like, how many times are you going to be able to talk to Harrison Ford? Like, go do it. And I was like, okay, bye. Just like, I have to do it.
Exactly.
But yeah, stuff like that.
It sounds like one of the things that has made you successful is that you kind of you leave all that sort of geeky fear behind. Is that the kind of advice that you might give somebody who wants to go into this side, that so entertainment journalism? Yeah,
because I think that's what makes us so much fun and I've realized as I've been doing it longer and longer that like when I pull a movie out of nowhere, and I like my Lee Pace interviews are also one of my favorites because I wore a shirt that said Lee Pace is 6'5", and he started laughing and he's like, well, I know exactly what kind of interview this is about to be because I just had that shirt on. And then I made a joke, or I brought up the movie The Fall that he was in that I loved when I was a teenager, and he was like, oh my God. And then I brought up, I made a Rum Tum Tugger joke because Terrence Mann plays the older version of Lee Pace. And he was like, the way this show hits just for you. Sorry. But like things like that, like they make my interviews more fun for me. And I think more fun on the back end because it's like, I'm showing that I'm not just someone who watched this one thing and then has asked my questions that have to be pulled for something. Like it is rooted in my nerdiness and also like just the conversation as a whole.
Yeah. No, I think what you said earlier is spot on. It's you don't try to separate that nerdiness, and that's probably why I enjoy reading your articles, is because it's coming from a place of somebody who loves the same stuff I do. It's not written for it's not written for the people who they're trying to expand their universe into. You're writing it for the person who gets where you're coming from, and that's really exciting. One more question before we go into the 10 question segment. There's a lot of Star Wars on the horizon. 2024 has at least 4 things that we know about on the horizon. And there's a couple of movies that are still down the pike. What are you most excited for? Going back to, prequel kid, Star Wars fan, your whole life, we're in this new, it's not a new era anymore of Star Wars. I mean, we're in the multiple things a year era of Star Wars. Yeah. What are you most excited about? And I'll also ask the other side, what are you kind of like most apprehensive about? And not because you don't want to see it, but because of just knowing fandom.
Oh, well, both what I'm the most excited about and apprehensive about is the same then, because it's Rey. I am so excited about the Rey movie. Like, I was in the room when they announced the Rey movie at Star Wars Celebration, and I was sitting next to 2 of my friends who also very much love Rey, and we just were screaming because we were just like, oh my God, it's Daisy Ridley. Oh my God, she's coming back. It's going to be like, we were just so excited that was happening. Yeah. But then you've seen recently how a lot of those, I'm going to call them neckbeards now. You've seen a lot of how those neckbeards are reacting to, a director making a true statement. A female director has never directed a full-length Star Wars movie. That has not happened. We've gotten great female directors on television shows. I love Deborah Chow. I love Bryce Dallas Howard. Leslie Headland is a friend of mine, so I'm so excited to see what she did with The Acolyte. Like, all of those women are telling these stories on Disney Plus on the television side of things. But it's really exciting that Rey is also having a female director, because it's the first time we're going to see that. And so all of that anger has made me really kind of like, is this what it's going to be the entire time leading up? Like, I don't want another Captain Marvel where everyone is so mean that you can't say anything against it, because then they're all going to think the same thing. Like, if you dared to be like, oh, I think the movie could have done like this one thing different, they've been like, see, you hated it. And it's like, that's not what I said. Right. I said one thing maybe differently, but not that I was mad about that one thing. Right. And it's having to fully, like, as a woman, be like, great, you've taken away my ability to talk about this movie in a way that's not positive online, because you're going to run with it and you're going to trash anything that comes out of my mouth, or you'd be like, and see, she agrees with me. And I'm like, I don't at all. Right. And I think we've seen it time and time again with female-led movies where they make us basically have to either like it or shut up. And it's not fair. Right. So it makes me apprehensive, because I'm like, what if I do have a problem with the Rey movie and want to talk about it, and I can't because of how people have reacted to it in the past? And so it's like, I'm very, very excited about it, but I'm also very apprehensive. Yeah. And it's like, I also really can't wait for the Mando Grogu movie, because clearly I love Grogu, and it's Pedro Pascal, so like, and Brendan Wayne and Liz Keefe, and it's like, I am very excited to see how that movie pans out and how much they're going to deal with like him in a helmet and not in a helmet. But I also, like, everything I'm excited about was always about constantly thinking about, well, what naysayer is going to make it insufferable to talk about this product?
And that, it's funny you said that about the Rey movie, because and the perspective there, because I'm in a similar situation in that, people call me a shill. And I mean, we make shill shirts. I will actually give me an address offline. I will send you a shill shirt.
You just want a shill. And I'm like, what money am I getting paid?
Exactly right. What? What? But it's funny because similar to you, I love Force Awakens. I feel like The Last Jedi is one of my favorite Star Wars stories. Mm-hmm. I don't watch that movie all the time because it's a heavy movie. Like if I watch Star Wars, I'm probably going to be a little lighter. I have a lot of issues with Rise of Skywalker, but I also know that it's the favorite movie of a lot of people. And so I live in this weird world of, I have what I think, because I do have a writing background, real honest critiques, but I'm apprehensive to talk about them because I don't want somebody to come around and say, see, you hate it too. And, or to have it come across that I'm shitting on something that somebody loves and at the end of the day, do you find that it sounds like you do. And how do you manage sort of editing yourself in this world so that you're not dealing with something that's not related to what you're trying to do, I guess?
I try, especially my problems with Rise of Skywalker are Chewie's my favorite Star Wars character. Something that people often think is a bit, and it's not. Chewbacca is my favorite Star Wars character of all time. Love Chewie. Chewie's entire family. I just did my friend and my co-host Katrina on Padro. They have a podcast about Clump Shittos, and my Clump Shitto was all of Chewie's family because I thought Malia was in Solo, and then learned on air that was not the case. Because I was like, what? But who is that? Who is that Wookiee that's just hugging Chewie and Solo? And they were like, not Mala. And I was like, this is hate towards me. But love Chewie. To answer this story, one of my biggest gripes with the Rise of Skywalker is that they fake out kill Chewie and then emotionally rob us of any kind of growth, and then instantly are like, he's fine. I'm like, what was the point of this? Little things like that. And so I always am I pinpoint exactly what my issue is with it because I do pride myself on. Everyone knows that most of the time I'm going to love whatever I'm watching because I find something to love in it. And because that's just more fun when I'm watching a movie. I don't want to sit there and be mad the entire time. I would rather find the thing that I genuinely love in it and talk about it that way. And when I do my reviews, I also do that. I pinpoint the problems I have, but I also am like, but here's all the good stuff. This is the good stuff. Because I get very angry when everything's just negative. And so what I try and do is I get as specific as I can. So then if someone does love this thing, they're not looking at my review and being like, well, she hated it. They're like, no, she hated this part. And that's okay. And they see the exact thing that I'm complaining about.
Right. I think it's funny too, because I don't care what, there's very few perfect movies. And if you anybody who grew up on the original trilogy, you don't have to look too deep to find issues as a critique. I mean, there's a reason why critics were like, I don't know what this Star Wars thing is. It's going to be a flop, right? There's reasons for that. So yeah, you're right. And I think just it's unfortunate that right now the algorithm pays to be negative versus being positive. Well, Rachel, we have this thing on the show where we do this 10 question segment where we ask you 10 questions that are sort of in the vein of Inside the Actors Studio. There's no wrong answers. I won't judge you. The internet will, but I can't speak for the internet. So you can answer long, short, one word, full paragraph. Let's have some fun. The first question is pretty simple. What's your favorite Star Wars movie, TV show, or book? Or you can do all three. I've had people do all three.
I will do all three.
All right.
My favorite Star Wars movie is a tie between Return of the Jedi and Revenge of the Sith.
Okay.
I know. I like threes, and then Rise of Skywalker ruined it.
Because you had such high hopes. You were like, this is going to keep it going. Oh,
because my favorite Indiana Jones movie is Last Crusade. So it's like,
cool.
I love the third movie for some reason in trilogies. Well, now it's no longer a trilogy for Indiana Jones, but it was for most of my life. My favorite TV show, as much as I I love Andor, but like Obi-Wan Kenobi truly was like what I always wanted to happen. So I think I have to say Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yep.
Just because I got my Leia.
Right.
And then my favorite book is Bloodline, but also tied with Life Debt. Because I do love, like I said, Chewie is my favorite character. So I love Life Debt. But Bloodline is because of Leia.
Yeah, Bloodline is funny. When people do talk about books, that tends to be like the favorite one. And I don't know have you ever had a chance to interview Claudia Gray?
No, but I did. She walked past me at New York Comic Con when I was dressed like Yelena. And she looked at me and goes, "Great Yelena cosplay." And I was just like, "Thanks." And I was going to do interviews, but I was like, "What the hell?" I'm just like,
can I? Yeah. Yeah. No, I had that.
But it was at Star Wars Celebration and Roundtable, but like not like talk to her.
I had the opportunity to have her on the show, and she said the best thing about writing Leia is everybody knows who she is, and the worst part about writing Leia is everyone knows who she is. And Bloodline, I think she also kind of nailed it from that perspective as well with Bloodline. And I love that you have a Chuck Wendig book on there because my favorite, I love those books. Those three books everybody's like, those are the worst of the Disney era. And I'm like, no, I love them. So
it's so good. It's like, because I'm not getting my favorite EU characters, but so I'm like, I gotta find my joy where I find it.
Yeah. And Snap Wexley. Come on, Snap Wexley. And we're good. Okay. What is your favorite non-Star Wars movie? If you're going to sit down on a Saturday afternoon and just throw a movie in, what's it going to be?
American Psycho.
Oh my God. This is great. My wife is like, "Is that really one of your favorite movies?" I'm like, "Yeah, it is." Actually,
it's my favorite story ever.
Yeah.
My favorite musical. It's top one of them. I now have 2 musical tattoos, and one of them is the American Psycho, the musical tattoo. And the book was hard to get through, but I did it because I love the movie and the musical so much.
That's awesome. Cool. All right. What is your favorite Star Wars collectible that you own? It doesn't necessarily need to be a toy or something that anybody can own, but what's your favorite Star Wars thing?
Oh, my blaster. Someone made me, when I did the Fordcast, someone made me Han's blaster. And I have a Mando helmet. I have my own armor that my brother made me.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I have my purple lightsaber because Mara Jade is my girl. As much as I love Mace Windu, someone, when I made it, they were like, "Oh, you big Mace Windu fan?" And I was like, "A big Mara Jade fan." They were like, "Who?" I was like, "Exactly. None of you know."
Tell me the machete order. Go.
You don't know who Mara Jade is?
All right. So let me ask you this. It's not on my top 10 list, but I'm very curious. Do you think with all the EU touches that we're getting with this, with the way Filoni is telling the stories, is Mara Jade going to come back at some point in one form or another?
So bad. I want to play her. I want to just be in. That is like whenever someone's like, "What Star Wars character would you want to play?" I'm like, Mara Jade. Like, I don't even like Luke Skywalker like that. I just love her. And I really thought that Rey and Kylo were gonna be my twins because Jaina and Jason were my favorite.
Yep.
And so I was like waiting for it, and then it didn't happen.
Yeah.
It's like, but
you have a very healthy response to it. You're not like, "They ruined my Star Wars." You're like, "Oh, okay, it's a different story." That's fine.
A lot of Raylo fans used to get mad at me because they're like, "She doesn't think they're a couple." I'm like, and my friend Maggie, who's a big Raylo, had to be like, "It's just that she loves the twins." like, relax. She's not mean about it. She just wants them to be siblings. And I'm like, yeah, I want them to be the twins.
Yeah, it could have been, but hey, whatever. We got what we got. That's all right.
And that's fine. I just didn't get my twins. And now I don't know if I'll ever get them.
Well, who knows where this Rey story is going? We'll see what happens.
Surprise!
I don't know. Yeah. Oh, that. Yeah. Well, hey, Luke and Leia. Yeah. I don't know. You know what? I'm going to leave that there because I could get weird. What's your favorite Star Wars sound effect?
Ooh, sound effect. I guess it would have to be a lightsaber.
Yeah.
Because I like the pew pews, but the pew pews are only funny when you go pew pew. Like it's not like the actual sound of a blaster, but the lightsaber is soothing.
That hum, right? That kind of, they should make it. There's got to be an ASMR video of just lightsaber humming.
It's just lightsaber hums.
It's just got to be. And if there's not, I'm going to go do it and make 10 hours of lightsaber hum and be a millionaire on YouTube. Yeah, right. But I'll have to be angry about something if I'm going to make any money on YouTube.
You have to be angry and make your own lightsabers to do it.
And sell them 10 hours of the sound of my lightsaber that I'm selling for $1,200. I think we cracked the code, Rachel. I think we got to figure it out.
That's how you find success.
Who is your favorite Star Wars droid?
That's a great question. I love Dio because I do love that Dio just goes, no, thank you. And just like, rolls away from people. R2-D2 will always have my heart though.
Yeah.
Because I love him in the prequels, especially. Like I loved him in the original trilogy, but he ended up being so sad when you learn that he's the only one that remembers Anakin and like remembers the time before since they wiped C-3PO.
Yeah.
But it is annoying because I hate C-3PO. Like if someone asked me if I could destroy Palpatine or C-3PO, I would probably choose C-3PO because I hate him so much.
I am going to find a clip and send it to you of when Jason Fry was on the show. Mm-hmm. And I was asking Jason about my question used to not be who's your favorite droid. It was who do you prefer, 3PO or R2? I felt like that was too divisive. But he said C-3PO is secretly a monster. He is the most self-centered. And the line that he brought up to me, which I'm like, yes, in Return of the Jedi, when Luke shows up in hologram in Jabba's palace, not in the hologram, he says, "Oh, Master Luke has come to rescue me." Like he only cares.
He was stuck in carbonite.
Right, he's here to get his iPhone C-3PO and bring him home. That's right.
The most relatable thing ever is when they shut him off in Empire. They're just like, enough, and they just like shut him off. I've never been happier. Like, and I love. So, like, there are so many droids, and, like, I love L3. Like, I love Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Phoebe Bridgers. I love her. I love K2. Like, most of the talking, walking droids I enjoy. And then there's C-3PO, and I'm like, I would take you out. Like in the the quote from The Office where it's like if he had 3 bullets or if he had 2 bullets and he had like Hitler, Stalin, and Toby, he would shoot Toby twice. Right. And in any scenario, I'm killing C-3. He's done.
It's funny. We did Jason and I did a hashtag C-3PO is a monster after my interview with him, and Anthony Daniels blocked me. He's the only Star Wars celebrity that has blocked me. And
not to be mean to Anthony Daniels, but I do think it's just his energy.
It was perfect. I mean, it's almost the perfect response to it. Yeah. Right? I mean,
we're like, dude, look in the mirror. So many of us are like, I hate that guy. It's the worst. And he also, I don't know if I could say this on here, you can just put a droid noise over me, but he cock blocks Han and Leia constantly.
Right. Yes. But again, so I always come back to like, this is why Star Wars is so great, because there are a number of people who I've interviewed who are like, C-3PO is my favorite. I love him. And it's like, that is awesome.
I'm happy for them.
We're happy for that. I'm going to mock you a little bit out of pure love, but you're wrong. It's not C-3PO.
Happy for you. Could not be me.
Okay. I think you sort of answered this already, but which Star Wars character would you like to be and why? You said Mara Jade, but
I would want to be Mara. But if I had to pick live action characters already, I would. They all die. I'm like thinking, I was like, Leia is the first one that comes to mind, but I've always had a complicated relationship with Leia. And then Carrie Fisher's the one reason I don't have a complicated relationship with her anymore.
Right.
because she told me something that I was like, "You're so right, girl. Go on." But I mean, yeah, it would have to be Leia, because I was like, otherwise it would be Jin, and I'm like, both of them have very sad lives. Like, so I don't necessarily want to be Jin or Leia, but I was like, Leia at least has a cool life where she gets to kiss Han Solo.
There you go. If you get the yes. Okay. What is your Star Wars unpopular opinion? That's
other than C-3PO sucks. Because often I say that people are like, what? Like, he sucks. My unpopular opinion is that men don't understand Han Solo or Luke Skywalker. But they constantly misunderstand those characters, and then when they do things that are in their character arcs, they get mad and act like babies online. And like, that's in character. You just didn't pay attention to the characters.
It shocks me that, and maybe it's because, I hate to say it this way, but maybe it's because I am a 53-year-old man. I understand, like, Luke, like, he worked his butt off to get to where he wanted to, and then things still fell apart. It's just like, why? I can see, look, there are days I want to just go to an island and just, like, have nobody bother me and just deal with life, you know? Your observation of Han, your observation of Han, though, is spot on, and I had never really thought about it that much. Other than, like, a lot of people say, I love Han Solo because I can sort of associate with him, and I think people don't realize they're associating with him because he's just a guy. He's just a guy who just ended up in, like, the middle of the thing, and
he doesn't like that he's there.
Right.
He's like, I would rather not be. When it's like I said, I got to interview Alden Ehrenreich for his short film at Tribeca, and I, like, didn't want to bring up too much about Solo, and I did, like, as we were getting into talking about acting and stuff, I said, I was like, I did want to thank you, because, like, I was very concerned about this movie going into it, because I was like, oh, men really don't know how, like, there's a lot of guys writing on this movie. Right. What's going to happen? And then I saw it, like, actually unfold. He was like, wait, what do you mean about men not understanding Han Solo? And I explained it, and he was like, you're like one of the few people who I've talked to who understood that about Han. And I was like, most of my friends do too. I was like, women recognize that Han Solo is not a ladies' man. He doesn't know how to talk to Leia. She does all of the talking, and that he just doesn't want to be around anyone, and he got kind of forced into taking care of these kids. Yeah, because he's a grumpy old dog. He's Chewie's dog. Everyone calls Chewie the dog. Chewie's the owner, because Han's going to die while Chewie's still alive.
That's true. And you're right. Alden, actually, I think that's why Alden was such a great Solo. And I think it's one of the things that people who want to critique it do. But he was great because he didn't try to be Harrison Ford. He tried to be the character. Yeah. And I think that's what made it so great. It's still such a fun movie. Yeah, there's things we don't need to know, like how he got his last name, but I'm over that and I'm moving on.
Alone Solo.
Yes, that's how I got my last name. I went to a bar by myself and I was Pete Solo. I don't know that. Okay. All right. If you could own
apparently.
Right. Exactly. All right. If you could own any spaceship or vehicle from the Star Wars universe, what would it be?
Probably the Razor Crest. I love the Falcon. I think the Falcon is beautiful and I love her, and she's a piece of junk. But I think the Razor Crest was really cool. I miss the Razor Crest. Yeah. I know, like, he has that cool new ship, but it's not my Razor Crest. I miss her.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I'm a huge, I want him to find a used Razor Crest somewhere and bring it back. Paint your yellow stripes on the side, please.
Yeah, it was cool when I thought they were going to have the Slave One, but I was like, nah, I want the Razor Crest back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go find it.
Yeah, and as much as I love the N1 from the prequels, it just doesn't. It's the wrong guy who's flying it, I guess. I don't know. Maybe that's what I'm thinking. I love it, and I'm glad to see it. And I still remember vividly as, again, OT guy going into the prequels and seeing the N1 ships and being like, okay, that looks pretty cool. It looks shiny, but it looks really cool. And again, if you want to talk pew pew, to me, it's got one of the most memorable sounding lasers, but this is where I geek out. I can't answer Star Wars trivia, but I could geek out on sound effects and special effects. What is your favorite Star Wars moment?
Okay. I have one that's a joke, and then I have a serious moment. So my joke is I still, to this day, can picture Hayden Christensen waking up shirtless in the bed after he has the nightmare about Padme dying, which I do think is like a very specific, like, millennial attracted to men thing. Like, if you were attracted to men, you were like, what is this? Like, it was like an awakening for any millennial who was watching Revenge of the Sith in theaters, because they were like, hello, sir.
Wait a second. This was just a fun Star Wars movie until now.
He stand up shirtless, and we all were like, yes. But which that moment did spawn me and my best friend having a joke that we still have to this day, which was like, does Anakin's hand, is it ever cold? So, like, does Padme wake up and she's like, oh, Anakin, your hand's cold? Like, we called it his claw, but we were like, is she ever like, cold claw? Like, because his hand's cold?
Right.
Because it's like, it is a metal hand, and he's sleeping in a bed next to her. Like, does it get cold, or is it because of the sheets? Like, what's going on? But my serious moment is Mustafar, like, which I do think is a very, like, millennial thing that we all quote it. We still remember every single line, and it's like that. I also have seen online is like a very rooted in, like, female fans really, like, still quote that entire scene, and, like, men do it too, but, like, everyone I've seen is a woman being like, quote this entire thing, and we all do it like without fail. We're like, my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. And so that to me is just kind of that community moment where we're all obsessed with this thing and we still remember it. And as much as I love other Star Wars moments, I think that one is still, like, I get hype every time that scene comes on.
That's excellent. I mean, I've done 196 interviews for the show, I think, and nobody's ever pointed that out. Why do you think it is? Is it because it was like sort of the climax of all three movies, or?
Yeah, I think it's rooted in that it's the emotional climax, but it's also just like the way that Ewan McGregor delivers those lines is so kind of like, it is very iconic. And then you have Hayden Christensen in a good performance. People always like kind of tear him down, but he was doing a great job with this scene because he's saying it in a monotone way, which is because Darth Vader is descending into, like, this darkness. And so I think it works really well, and it's just going back and forth between those two. And it's also, like, kind of funny because Obi-Wan Kenobi is giving him an absolute when he says only a Sith deals in absolutes. Right. So it's like, dude, you're doing it too. Yep. I just think, like, that whole sequence is great, minus, the ending where she dies of a broken heart. It is truly just like a great ending to a movie with an amazing fight, like, sequence, and just everything about it is so good, and I love it a lot.
That's great. That's cool. All right, the last question on this 10-question list is, what is your go-to Star Wars quote?
My allegiance is to the Republic. It's democracy. I have, when I met Hayden Christensen, I made him kneel so I would have the high ground.
Right.
And I wore a shirt that said my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy, with, like, that my friend Candace made for me, and has Obi-Wan Kenobi on it.
That's great. I'm going to see now, because of this conversation, I'm going to have to put it in Revenge of the Sith. I haven't watched that in a while. It's funny. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and I realized just the other day, like, I don't really go back and watch all of it. It's just so much other stuff to watch. But every now and then to throw yourself into that, is really cool. And I'm going to have to watch it. And I always think it's funny when I think that, the prequel generation, they love Phantom Menace. I always think I associate Phantom Menace with it, but I think it's sounding more and more like more and more people are talking. Yeah. And I think that it's more and more it's Revenge of the Sith, which, as I have, when somebody asks you to rank your Star Wars movies, you always sort of moan and go, no, I'm not going to do that. But Revenge of the Sith always feels like it's creeping up on the list for me every time. So
Yeah, well, it's those two movies just, and maybe it's because I loved Hayden, but like my family went to Italy, and my one request is that we went to where they filmed, what's it called? Where they filmed Attack of the Clones.
Yeah.
I was like, can we please go to Naboo? And my mom was like, what? And I was like, we need to go to Naboo.
Do you mean Sereno? Or is that where, I don't know where it was. What?
No, it was in Lake Como. So it's
Lake Como, that's it, yes.
On Lake Como that they filmed it. And so like I wore my Attack of the Clones shirt. Like I was like full dressed up like a Star Wars nerd in this in Lake Como. And so like all day I had a Star Wars shirt on, like the whole day we were in Lake Como. But it was because we were going there.
It makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. Well, Rachel, this has been so much fun. I really enjoyed talking to you. I love getting your perspective. I love having conversations with people who understand that fandom should be fun first and not a competition. So where can people keep up with you on the interwebs?
I will say before I do that, I am sad that I talked over one of the questions, I think, where you were going to ask me about classic rock. And I was like, man, we were going to talk about classic rock.
Oh, man, here's what we'll do. I'll have you back again. Maybe we'll have you on our live show. And yeah, I could talk classic rock for weeks, months, days.
Yeah, I keep getting all of my classic rock tattoos now. And so like, I'm slowly working through all my favorites.
So, all right. So what are your classic rock tattoos?
Well, I have Two of Us Riding Nowhere, which is for my dad, because we used to listen to the Beatles all the time in the car. And every time we drove home, we listened to Two of Us. This Hourglass is for Silver Springs by Fleetwood Mac, because it says time casts a spell on you. And so I have little spell things. I'm going to get my Bruce Springsteen tattoo here, which is going to be a quote from Atlantic City, which is my favorite Bruce Springsteen song. Awesome. And then I need to get my Bowie, which is a lyric from 5 Years.
Wow, that's cool. That's great. See, I just started getting tattoos a couple of years ago, and I have a Fulcrum tattoo, I have a Darth Maul tattoo, but I'm literally named after Pete Townsend. My dad named me after Pete Townsend from The Who.
My dad, that was my dad's favorite, was The Who. He loved the Beatles and The Who were his two favorite bands. Yeah,
so I feel like I got to get like that logo that they have, the red and blue circle somewhere at some point.
I've gotten all my arms are all covered now.
That's awesome.
This is my Leia, and then I have my other Star Wars one on this arm, so they're all over the place.
That's awesome. That is really cool. That is cool. Well, you're New York based. I'm sure sometime we'll meet at some Comic-Con or something, and that's really cool. So let me ask you again, where can we I just want to capture that. Where can people catch up with you online?
You can follow me on X, Twitter. I don't call it X. At Rachel Leishman. You can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Rachel_Leishman. You can follow my writing at The Mary Sue. I also do some freelance stuff for Collider. And you can listen to Padro Pascal, Cinema Sibs, which is me and my brother talking about movies, and the Fordcast, where we talk about all of Harrison Ford's movies.
That's awesome. Make sure to tell Katrina I said hello. She's a friend of the show. She's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rachel. This has been a ton of fun.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Well, that wraps it up for this episode of Around the Galaxy. Thanks to Rachel, and thank you for listening. If you had fun, please like, subscribe, share, rate, and review it. Head on over to our website at theSSWnetwork.com for more information about merch, how to become a patron and join us when we do recordings like this, and more information about the show. This has been Copyright 2024 Pete in the Seat Studios, and our music is brought to us by the band Apollo's Ghost.